Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining Jeff Berkowitz and I. We're going to be taking a look at some of the major issues going on this week. And Jeff, presidential politics still in the news.
Well, Terry, the world continues to get everything wrong. According to people, the mainstream media in Illinois and elsewhere, you know what? Biden's doing wonderful. This senile man who can barely make it up to the stage, he's walking crippledy like there's a neural problem, but he's going to win. He's going to win. Everything's coming up roses. The economy's good. The market's good. Immigration's fine. It's these mean old Republicans and Trump that screwed up the whole thing. They forced him to admit 7.5 million illegals into the country. Trump did that.
Well, speaking of illegals, both as we tape this on February 29th.
It's a joke. It's a joke, Terry. It's a joke by the mainstream
well,
media.
I look, obviously, I get it. But as we tape this on February 29th, both candidates, President Trump and President Biden, are going to be going to the border today. But as the Daily Mail points out, President Biden's going to be going to the one place where there are no immigrants coming across the border. And why? Because Texas set up razor wire. And so I don't know what they're doing down there with the President Biden. It's the second time he's gone. But again, the first time they cleaned it up, and apparently they're doing that again. Maybe they're shooting a commercial about how well he's doing keeping immigrants from coming in.
Even the Daily Mail, look, even the Daily Mail got it wrong. Because in Brownsville, where Biden is, that's where they have 20 encounters a day. We don't know how many gotaways because we don't count them, okay? And, oh, you're right, they're down in both areas because what Texas is doing for the good. But where the president is today, there are about 2,000 encounters. What is that? That's about 100 to 1. Because Biden's there to shoot, a video that shows no problem, no illegals, zero. Like the number of kids at CPS who read and do math proficiently. There are many schools where it's zero. It's like zero Coke. It's zero at CPS. It's zero illiterate. Zero kids are literate. Zero kids do math proficiency. And that's what they're doing in Brownsville. Zero encounters. Zero anything.
Well, the number one issue in the country, according to all the polling, is the Biden border policies and this invasion that we're having. And the result is, as we look at the swing states, this is a poll from Bloomberg, we see that Trump has maintained his lead going back to October, as we see here, roughly 5 to 6 points. That's something that certainly Biden is going to have to be facing as he goes deeper and deeper into this year. And I still question, because another thing that came out this week, Jeff, as we're taping this, is former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy spoke with Fox News and was saying that when you're one-on-one in the White House having a conversation with Biden, he still has to look at cue cards that he holds in his hand. And if you try to change the subject from something that's on the cue cards that he's holding, he can't do it. And the man's feebleness is becoming more and more pronounced. We have investigations into corruption, and obviously we have the border invasion taking its toll, as we saw in the polling.
Terry, there you go. You're believing your lying eyes again. Why don't you believe what they tell you at the presidential briefing? Okay, Pierre, or whatever the hell her name is. Okay, because she will tell you every day we see Joe Biden and we see him and he's doing so well. He's so alert. He's so verbally dexterous, or is it verbal dexterity? And he's so good, you just don't see it. You don't see what we see. You keep believing, Terry, along with the others who watch it, the other 300 million people, 330 million, and they believe their lying eyes that guy, Biden, can't speak, he can't move, he can't operate.
I don't know if you've heard. Have you heard in Italy, there's a TV, it's become a popular TV skit, where a comedian impersonates Joe Biden fumbling and on his inability to speak, his inability to walk off the stage. It's reminiscent, I suppose, of when Chevy Chase used to mock Gerald Ford falling downstairs and all.
Right.
But it's become an international joke, Biden's feebleness. Yeah. And
So
It's nothing.
we'll get to this, Terry, but there's a flow to this show because we're talking about the the Biden idiosyncrasies, how peculiar he is. But there's a complement to that, and we'll get to that because in Illinois, if you're watching in Illinois, Governor Pritzker just told us a week ago, this is a great state. Oh, your lying eyes say we're losing congressional people, congressional representation. We're now down to 17.
Well, and we want to get into the spending. The one last thing I want to say about presidential politics, though, is Illinois had its own little version of kicking Trump off the ballot. Now, I don't think that's going to stand, but it's really outrageous with the Democrats, what they've done here in these different states to try to kick Trump off the ballot and take the choice away from the voters. We can't let the voters have their say. We got to do everything we can, trumped up legal theaters we saw going on in all these states. So,
Terry, there you go again. There you go again. You don't understand. This is about states' rights. The Democrats, the Biden folks, they've discovered states' rights.
Yeah, exactly.
And if the state of California has their Supreme Court say Trump should be off the ballot, he should be off the ballot. If in Maine they say Trump should be off the ballot, he should be off the ballot. If in Illinois, the Circus Court of Cook County, also known as the Circuit Court of Cook County, but I practice law, so the lawyers affectionately call it a circus court because state court is basically a circus. And what did they do? They had a circus judge, Circuit Court of Cook County judge, say, yes, he should be off the ballot because don't you know, Trump is an insurrectionist. And it says right here in the Constitution. That's the first time that circus court judge has ever looked at the Constitution. It is a big effing joke, quoting Joe Biden. Remember when Joe Biden leaned over to Obama and he thought the mic was dead? This was years ago.
A big effing deal.
Big effing deal. So, Terry, stop making a big effing deal.
Isn't it nice, Jeff, that we don't have to worry about our judges actually convicting someone of being an insurrectionist? We can just have them be efficient and deem that to be so, and then kick them off the ballot for being something they were never even charged with.
It's not that they don't have to be convicted. They don't have to be arrested. They don't even have to be indicted. Jack Smith, you know, sort of the Biden special counsel, it was all about January 6th. It was all about an insurrection. But he didn't indict him for that because there was not enough evidence of that. But there's enough evidence, according to the circus court judge in Cook County, to boot his ass off the ballot. And you know what? None of these people remember in Maine, in Colorado, in Circuit Court of Cook County, it's the U.S. Constitution. It's federalism. It's the effing U.S. Supreme Court, folks. They control. They preempt the state crap, okay?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have to come in, and they are going to be taking this up. And one last thing we'll say about Jack Smith, who is the special prosecutor looking at Trump, is because the Supreme Court said they will consider the question of whether a sitting president can be charged with some act that he did while in office, that is going to delay the prosecution moving forward with Jack Smith because he's going to have that. So what has been interesting is we looked at these polling in the swing states where all these legal challenges to Trump, the Democrats thought were going to take a toll on his popularity. The opposite has been happening. In fact, there was a person on the news from Chicago recently, a black woman, who was saying she's never voted Republican in her life, but now she's going to vote Republican because she's just so fed up with the primarily, again, because of this immigration that's happening in and around Chicago.
Do you realize Fannie Willis, who is this woman in Atlanta, the DA, the woman who thinks she can lie on, that's what it appears, she can lie because she gets to lie. Trump can't lie, even if he's not lying. Terry, Trump is indicted for election interference. Now, people can file fraudulent, frivolous lawsuits. And Jack Smith can do that, and the Dems can do it, and that ain't election interference because they can tie up Trump with all sorts of pretrial, trial stuff. But wait, maybe the U.S. Supreme Court says we got to decide this immunity thing first. We got to decide if Trump can be kicked off the ballot.
Let's close this part out because we got other things to move on to. But
let me just say, Terry, by the time they do that, which is the orderly process of due process, it may be that the election will occur. And the plan to interfere with the election will be sort of blocked. And all the dreams of the Democrats will be over. Terry, you're giving the Democrats nightmares watching this show. Do you want to do that?
It's just so blatantly obvious. And the idea that we're going to use the legal system as a political tool should be roundly rejected by everyone. And I keep wondering, where are all these legal legends in Illinois, and why aren't they speaking out and saying this is wrong? We should not be using the court system as a legal tool against political opponents. And I would hope that the American public resoundingly reacts and rejects that. These local prosecutors should never be sticking themselves and interfering. You want to talk about election interference? This is election interference, and it was obviously planned. There's reports that these prosecutors had been working with the White House to coordinate their efforts. So this is something we have not seen in any previous presidential election. We should never see it again. This is wrong, and it diminishes the entire legal structure of the United States. And we ought to have our people beside Jonathan Turley and Alan Dershowitz speaking up against this. It's wrong that we're using the American courts in this way.
You're so old-fashioned.
All right, well, let's move on. Another big thing we had happen.
Here's just one thing fundamental to this country, right there in the U.S. Constitution, First Amendment, freedom of speech. Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech. So if the president, he's not supposed to be blocked by Congress, just like you and I are not. He has a right to speak. He has a right to speak with governors in other states. He has a right to act politically. That's called the freedom of assembly. And maybe, just maybe, a lot of these things that Jack Smith and others charge the president with for their so-called election interference, they could be interfering with the president's right to engage in free speech. He has a good faith view that these things that were happening were improper, were fraudulent, and he sought to discuss them with others. And that has been turned into a conspiracy to defraud voters.
Okay.
Maybe the U.S. Supreme Court at the end of the day.
We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. The other big news is that we had Governor Pritzker deliver his annual budget address, combination of budget address and state of the state. Here we see the governor is proposing to spend $52.7 billion on the operating budget. When you throw in the capital budget, where the total budget is $123 billion, but typically we refer to, as you see there on the right, the general funds. 52.7 is what people are typically talking about when they refer to the state operating budget.
Why don't we, Terry, for purposes of our discussion, because we are going to discuss the budget and whether it's good or bad, and whether the state of the state in Illinois is good or bad for the rest of the show, I think we can round it off and just call this a $53 billion budget, which translates into roughly $4,000 per man, woman, and child in the state of Illinois. Roughly 13 million in population, divided into $53 billion, rounding off. That's roughly, under the old math, about $4,000 per capita. Terry, did the governor stand up? And when he gave his state of the state...
Hang on, let me bring that up and we discuss numbers. So here's what the governor is proposing.
$53 billion, an increase of roughly $800 million over 2024. And, you know, in 2019, when the governor came in, what were we spending in our budget? $40 billion. It's gone up $13 billion. Thank you very much, J.B. Pritzker. We're spending $13 billion more, roughly, rounding off. What is that, Terry? It's roughly about 30% increase. Thank you very much, J.B. Pritzker, because all that's going to be taxable, okay? And when we look at what you were just saying, the summary of the budget, where do we get most of our revenue from? Half of our revenue comes from individual income tax. Hey, Terry, that's you, me, and the others, the local guys, not the governor, who's a guy who found himself on third base and he thought he hit a triple. But no, he was born with, what, $3 billion? Never really had to work a day in his life. Maybe he did, but he didn't have to. Terry, it's kind of a luxury. So my point is, the governor should have stood up there a week ago and said, hey, I brought you over the last 5 years, I brought you an increase in our budget of 30%. Because his whole, Terry, one quick thing and then your turn. His whole quick way of looking at it, he looks at it in inputs, not output, not performance, but how much did we spend? Terry, the more they spend, the better it is for him, okay? Most people spend as little as you need to give people what they want. Teach kids how to read and how to do math proficiently.
Well, listen,
as we've tested.
Let's take a quick.
That's the big deal. Excuse me. When you think of the budget, say, are we getting stuff we value? I don't care how much you spend. I want to see results. I want to see results.
The governor says we have results since he took office. Let's hear what the governor had to say in talking about some of the infrastructure.
Across all 50 states, we are #2 for infrastructure, #2 for education, #3 for power grid reliability. We have the #1 and #2 best business schools in the country. And since 2018, we've moved up a whopping 13 spots in CNBC's best states for business. These are the things that matter to businesses looking for a home, where their workforce can live, work, and play affordably and with world-class healthcare and education. Now, we have a lot of work left to do, but we together have met this moment that we are in. Do not let the doom grifters steal your optimism about what's ahead for Illinois. Our future is bright and opportunity lies ahead.
And that's the governor making his point that, you know, things are going pretty good here in Illinois since he took over.
You know, Terry, he just wants to look at, cherry pick this and that, find somebody who says something nice about Illinois. It must be so. It must be so. We don't want to look. Now, we're #2 in this and workforce development. Yeah, we're #1 in this and we're #1 in education because we spend. He calls it investment. I call it spending, okay? It's only investment if you're truly performing, if you're giving young kids human capital, if you're teaching them how to read and write. He never talks about that, Terry, because the data from his own public school system, okay? 2 million kids in the Illinois public schools, 1.9 to be exact, 1.9 million, only a third of them, Terry, read at grade level. Only, so 1.2 million don't. He didn't tell you that, did he? No. He'll say something about, and maybe that's coming up, about language arts were doing great. Well, I'd like to know, what does language arts mean, and when did they measure it on the Illinois report card?
Well, let me bring up, since you're talking about education. I mean, here's where you go. Here's what we are spending in education in 2019, because that was the governor's first year in office. It was at $17,768, and now $23,734 spending per pupil, up 34%. What isn't up is reading proficiency, which went from 37.4%, which is by itself shameful, down to 34.6%.
Diversity, inclusion, equity, or DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Why doesn't he ask at CPS, which is a school that we know well, but you could ask around the state, but at the Chicago Public Schools, which is 85% minority, how's he doing on equity? You know, if the last, you know, in his period when he's been governor, it's been gyrating for blacks, I would say. The number of blacks who read at grade level tends to range over that 5-year period, roughly 12% to 18%. 12% to 18% of blacks read at grade level at CPS. Hispanics a little higher, remember, like 14% to maybe 20%, okay, 21%. It's terrible. The great bulk of the students at CPS, they don't read or do math at proficiency. Some would say it's not they don't read at grade level. Essentially, they don't read. They can't read, as you and I would understand it. And he doesn't care. And even the whites, it's at high, it's 50%. So there's a difference between, and it's nothing to do with genetics or skin pigmentation. If there's a difference, it has everything to do with preparation. Well,
look, here's the thing. The governor's laid out that things have gone the rosy scenario. Things have improved to some extent. Let me say something that what the governor has done well on economic terms. Just before the governor took office in the fall of 2018, the state of Illinois had $16 billion in unpaid bills it had racked up. The state is now paying bills net 30. There is no backlog, and we have $2 billion in the state's rainy day fund. So those are good things, and we'll say, you know, we'll give credit where credit is due. But there's other things where things are not so well and could be addressed. And Jeff, one of the things we might look at is how is the state doing on employment? Well, I mean, as we see here, the state has the third worst unemployment rate as of November in the United States at 4.7%. Now, maybe things will improve there. A lot of people are surprised we haven't had a turn down in the economy. In fact, the economy has been doing pretty good. Some numbers came out today that said inflation is continuing to slow. It's there, but continuing to kind of slow, and that's because the Federal Reserve has jacked up interest rates from where they were. They may even have some rate cuts coming up, some people think.
Terry, I think wrong on both accounts. You and I can disagree from time to time. So let's start with Illinois. As you pointed out, 4.7% unemployment in Illinois, okay? Third worst in the country in November. And Indiana, Tennessee, 3.6%. These are some of our neighbors. Iowa, 3.5%. Florida will go a little further, 3%. That's a big effing deal. Difference between 4.7%, 3%. A lot of people are unemployed, and that falls disproportionately on blacks and Hispanics, especially on blacks.
Let's take a look at
especially on blacks. Where's the equity, Governor? Where's the governor? I mean, the governor, you want to be president of the United States, okay?
Let me
answer for that equity.
Hang on one second. Let me take you out of the shot so we can read the headline on this one. Since 2019, Illinois has suffered the nation's second worst loss of employment, and that's from the Bureau of Labor.
Yeah, and most of the states, as you can see, hard to see all the aspects of the change. Most of the states are increasing their level of employment.
Florida and Texas, the two Republicans, as you can see, have done the best. Illinois, second from left, if you haven't seen that, Illinois is second only to California.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you very much, J.B. Pritzker. You didn't tell people last week that employment in Illinois, under your watch, the guy who wants to be president of the United States, J.B. Pritzker, under your watch, employment has gone down 122,000 jobs, losses of employment. I didn't hear that in the mainstream media. You hear it, Terry? No. Let's go on. How else is he doing? Okay. Maybe property taxes. Maybe he's done well there because he said he was going to give us property tax relief. Can't be, because Illinois still pays the nation's second highest in property taxes. Second highest. All those Democrats who are clapping, that's what he shows, okay? We'll give them another segment of the Democrats clapping. Are they clapping because Illinois is second highest in property taxes? They pay, on average in Illinois, property taxes paid as a percentage of the owner-occupied housing, 2%. In Iowa, it's 1.5%. And one of our other neighbors, okay, Michigan, 1.4%. Wow, everybody gets to pay higher property taxes. Where's all that wonderful stuff, Governor? Come on this show. Come on this show. Tell Berkowitz where he's wrong. Tell Terry Martin where he's wrong. Just do it. Show a little leg, right? Okay. Are we being too tough, Terry? You think?
Well, the other thing that we're feeling even more this week, speaking of things, gas prices. And, you know, Jeff, just the other day, I had to drive down to St. Louis on some business. I bought gas for $2.90. Here in Springfield, it is now at $3.59. That's a big difference. It's like 70 cents a gallon. You put 20 gallons of gas in the car, you know, you get a $14 difference every time the person in Missouri is getting the product for $14 less.
This is what you get when you go woke with J.B. Pritzker. When you're running for president with one eye and looking at Illinois with the other eye, you got to be woke, Terry. You got to have the nation's second highest state gas tax. And this is the guy, he doesn't want drill, baby, drill. He wants electric, okay? And Rivian, we haven't pointed out, Rivian stock has gone to hell in a handbasket, right? And it's gone from like a high 2 years ago to a low now at $10 a share. He didn't talk about that. He didn't talk about that, Rivian, baby.
Well, the other thing is impacting everyone, of course, is the high cost of buying everything with inflation. While it's slowed, the growth is slowed, inflation is up. Now, that's not so much the result of what the governor is doing, but on the other hand, it is what people have to be paying, families across the state. And what we didn't get in the budget dress, Jeff, is, as we already noted here, we didn't get one dime of property tax relief. So you're paying some of the highest property taxes in the nation, as we pointed out, and you're paying high for everything else.
Hold on, you're being an easy grader. You said you don't blame the governor for that. No, Terry, I blame him for that. You say, oh, how, Jeff, that's a national issue, inflation. Yeah, but he was the guy who wanted more and more spending. He was the guy going to Washington, D.C., spend more, not less. Spend trillions, okay? We got, you know, that $200 billion of infusion from the feds to Illinois. He wanted that. And when you do that for all the states, Terry, when you spend a lot more, you're going to have an increase in the money stock. Inadvertently, inadvertently, Pritzker was championing a higher increase in the money stock, more spending, more inflation. Oh no, Terry, is every bit when people, what's that price you had up there? That, you know, what's the price of beef? When you take a bite of that, thank J.B. Pritzker, okay? When you pay more for your chicken, 41%, thank J.B. Pritzker. He didn't tell you that. And one other thing, Terry, very quickly, when you said, oh, he did really well because, you know, we paid off all these bills. Well, no. Number one, Wirepoint says a lot of those bills went to bonded debt, not payoff. And some of that payoff came of that infusion of federal spending that gave us inflation. So when you want to give him all this credit, oh no, Terry, maybe you're being a little too fair. I don't think he gets the credit for those bills going down. We can discuss that. But the big picture here, folks, big picture is we're running out of time. J.B. Pritzker says, judge us by how much we spend.
We're going to have to cut it off, Jeff. But folks, that's the bottom line. We're trying to show both sides. This is the other side. It's obviously every governor crows about what he thinks he's done right. But Jeff, we're saying goodbye. Folks, thanks as always for watching. Leave us your comments.